So I took the trip down to Southern Maryland BMX for their Gold Cup qualifier for the region that I'm participating in. I was racing 31-35 cruiser as well as 26 to 35 intermediate on this day. For the cruiser moto that you're about to watch here, we had three riders, which means total points, which means I have to race all three motos. The person with the least amount of points overall at the end of three motos gets the overall win. So let's watch this through, then we'll analyze. All right, we're going to break down Moto 1 here. You guys are going to see the race through my lens. We're going to go through the things that I did well, the things that I did bad, and so forth. Starting off with the race, the first bad thing that happened was my terrible gait and first straight. You can see it for yourself right here. So there's the snap. For some reason, I lose my balance and lean to the right, and I actually even cross over into the lane on my right-hand side. If there would have been a rider there, they could have disqualified me, but thankfully there was one gate between me and the rider on my right. Let's go ahead and play. So I kind of regained my bearings here. We're getting over this first double. Everything's fine. But right about here on this roller, I kind of look, and I'm like, man, this guy to my left is pretty fast. He already has a bike length and a half on me going into turn one. This guy's name is Curtis Shook out of Pennsylvania. This is my first time racing him, so I didn't know what I was up against. But I was like, all right, if I want a chance to win this race, and since it's total points, I better make something happen in turn one and straight two. Let's go ahead and keep watching. I don't know what happened here, but I got sideways over this double. I mean, I've seen it from a couple different perspectives. I think I was just trying to dive to the inside, but my body weight wasn't there. But either way, I straightened it out, and I'm able to keep going into turn one. This is kind of interesting because even with the bad gate and that bobble there, I actually hold my momentum pretty well into turn one. And right about here, I was pleasantly surprised to see how close I was to him. I was like, okay, I'm still in this race and got a chance. Now, this is where I kind of leaned into my motocross background a little bit, and I wasn't afraid to dive towards the inside of this berm and stay low. And the reason being is because when I looked at the berm, when I did a track walk earlier that day, I noticed that the angle of the berm at the bottom was roughly the same as the top. It wasn't that kind of bowl shape that you're used to seeing on maybe a supercross track. It was actually pretty flat. So I sat there and I was like, there's not a massive advantage to going high in this turn. I would actually assume that the race line is actually going to stay kind of low in this berm to prevent people from trying to pass you on flat ground where they don't have bank or to force them to go to your outside. Either way, I felt like I was in a pretty good position here. Let's go ahead and keep playing. So we're pedaling out of turn one, and he got a nice little pull over that roller. And it was right about here where I don't know if my mind was playing tricks on me or not, but I thought that I felt his jersey brush over my glove. I'm not sure if we actually touched here. I just recalled us coming into contact 3 times down this second straight. And I just want to preface with what you're about to watch. I actually completely condone in the sport of BMX. My dad always taught me growing up, rubbing is racing, but taking someone out is not. So if you bump elbows or someone block passes you or high-lows you or takes your line, to me, that is racing. As long as you're not cross-jumping or you're intentionally T-boning someone in a turn, and maybe a couple other instances that I'm not pointing out right now, for the most part, I like this kind of racing. So I just want to be clear, I'm not upset about any of this. I think it was freaking awesome. So we're going over this step-up table, and I chose to keep my tires on the ground. I pumped this double right here, but I'm about to get a good manual where we manual side by side until, boom, we hit each other again. And this time you can see that my right glove is under his left forearm, which means if you look at our axles even, He is just marginally ahead of me. And again, because of the way that he's postured right here, he kind of has the upper hand if we were kind of fighting brute force style trying to go into turn one. Usually, the guy that has the arm over the other guy still has the advantage of sticking his elbows out and kind of preventing that pass, which is exactly what he did here. And that was really, really great heads up riding by him. Unfortunately, that little collision caused me to bobble. And then on the face of the final double going into turn two, I can tell by the way his bike is angled that he is about to cut off my line on the inside. And this is probably going to be the end of it. I've now fallen back to roughly half a bike length behind his front axle, and I already knew this was coming, and then boom, we hit each other. You can see the vibration from the camera there. We actually touched tires and potentially even axle bolts. My front and his rear axle bolt might have hit because it was, fairly violent, but I stayed in control and I was already expecting this to happen. So in one final attempt to make something happen, I dived to the inside, but I quickly realized that he just had way more speed than me, and he ran up that berm intentionally because he knew that I was probably going to do that. And from here, you can see there's just too much distance between us. There was no way for me to close the gap, but I'll tell you, this was an absolute blast to start the day of this Gold Cup qualifier at Southern Maryland BMX. Let's head over to Moto 2, watch it all the way through, and then we'll play it back in slow motion and analyze the footage.
Watch the gate.
Man, how cool is that? I turn around in Moto 2 and get the dub, which means that I'm now in the points race to potentially bag the overall for the day. Let's take a look at the cell phone footage because I like the perspective that this gives coming off the gate here. We get the snap, and you can see here that my gate is tremendously better than it was in Moto 1. However, it is still not on par with my opponents. He is already, it's kind of hard to tell from this exact angle, but he's already about a tire length ahead of me at this point. And it did cross my mind after the racing was over that maybe he had a different gear ratio that got him out of the gate quick. And maybe that's the reason why I was catching up to him in turn one and into the second straight. But we'll dissect that when we get there. Let's keep watching. All right, so we're pedaling. Everybody keeps the tires on the ground here, just trying to rob some cranks where we can. Nothing fancy over the roller, pedaling on the back side of it. But right here, this double going into turn one, you see me starting to change my trajectory and starting to go towards the inside. However, coming out of turn one, I'm actually on the outside of him again. I personally believe this is what made me win the race. From my POV, you can see me dive into the left, going to the inside of this turn, but you also notice that Curtis was staying on flat ground as well. But look at this right here. I'm on his inside, and then boom, I curve right. So why did you turn to the right and lose some of that momentum that you had, Lane? Well, there were three reasons for this that I calculated on a whim. The first reason is you can see that Curtis is still on flat ground. So that means that if I want to pass him here, I also have to pass him on flat ground, and he's eventually going to catch bank, and he's likely to have more traction than me. Two, even though I had more momentum than him, I didn't feel like it was enough to actually get ahead of the guy. So if you want to make that pass in a turn, you want to make sure you have at least a tire, preferably half or a full bike length before you start making these passes. And then last but not least, I also thought about the possibility of tricking him. Maybe he thought that I wasn't going to make the same inside line pass as I tried to do in Moto 1, But to his surprise or not, I chose to do the same one so that I could have the inside line going into turn two. Now, back on the cell phone footage, you can see again, I dive left, I change my mind, and then I turn right and go high in the turn here, which is contrary to what I said whenever we analyzed Moto 1. I said this is not the ideal race line based on my riding experience here. However, this opens up the possibilities of passing on his left or his right side, depending on how he's postured going in the second straight. And I just felt like it would have been safer for me to wait for that pass and try to do it when I can carry enough momentum for me to get an elbow ahead of him. You can see me getting some cranks in, and I'm clearly gaining on this guy, and I'm gaining on him really quick. I get a manual on top of the step up table, and right about here, we're roughly side by side, but I also have way more momentum than him going into the second double in the second straight. Now we're watching my POV out of the turn because I want you guys to see the massive momentum gains that I had coming in this step table here. I knew I was getting ready to make the pass, and boom, I'm pumping this double, and I look down, I see the shadows, and at this point, I'm now the race leader. It's now up to me to control the narrative as to what happens next on this straight and also going into the second turn. So I decided that I was just going to play it safe, keep the tires on the ground, and keep the inside of this line. And that's exactly what I did. I pumped this triple, keeping both tires on the ground, and I start shifting to the right-hand side of the track on the face of this double so that I can shut down his line and try to prevent him from trying to dive to my inside here. You can see that I also pump this double here, and I take a pretty modest race line through this turn since this one bowls a little bit more, but I stay to the right-hand side of the track. And the rest of the race is history. I get through the final turn, I get a couple manuals in, and then pop over the finish line tabletop, taking the win in Moto 2. So this is total points, which means between Curtis and I, whoever wins this race is going to get the overall. Let's have a look. Look, I'm really bummed about not getting the first place overall, but man, I gave it my best shot, and that's all I can ask for. Let's analyze the footage and see about the things that I could have done better, starting with the gate. Pretty good reaction, and I keep the bike straight, but look at the difference between me and Curtis. His lunge out of that gate and the forward momentum that he carries is so much stronger than what I was able to offer on this day. If we replay this footage a few times, you see that he actually torques that bike side to side to really make that bike do some of the work for him, where I feel like I'm trying to pedal straight up and down and not really doing all this side to side motion and getting the most out of my crank pedals. Now, I also do have a theory that he might have had a shorter gear ratio, maybe shorter cranks. I'm not sure, but nonetheless, he had amazing gates all day long. Now, in theory, because I have the inside gate, I should have an advantage going into turn one, but honestly, his gates and first straight were so strong that by this point, he already had well over a bike length once again going into turn one, and I knew that diving to his left wasn't going to do much good for me. As we shift over the POV, you see how he moves to the left side of the track. And right here, I did not get a good pump on the downside of that double into turn one. Both my tires just minorly leave the ground and rob me of some of that momentum. But thankfully, I got a couple good cranks into turn one. But right here, as I put my right leg down, getting ready to carve left, I felt my right leg giving out on me. It was cramping up and getting stiff. And this is a testament to what happened earlier in the day. I stayed stationary in my seat for too long talking to one of the riders in my tent. When I stood up, With him and another person in my tent as my witness, my legs were locking up on me. I quickly chugged some Gatorade. I took some magnesium malate, potassium chloride, and I got on my stationary roller and started doing some sprints. But truthfully, guys, this is what I get for trying to race class and cruiser on a hot summer day when my fitness isn't where it needs to be quite yet. I'm not one for making excuses. Curtis might have gotten the best of me, even if my legs weren't giving out on me here, considering how far ahead of me he is. But man, it is such a bummer that my body was giving out on me on such a good race. But I'm not giving up yet. I'm going around this turn, but it was right about here that I realized Curtis had a huge lead on me compared to the moto before, but also look at his race posture. So if we compare this to Moto 2, not only was I way closer, but look at my posture into this turn. I am carving it and I am ready to come out of it like a rocket with some serious cranks, where he is still going up the turn and trying to pedal against the bank where I'm starting to come down. And that is how I had so much more momentum than him in the race before this. But back to Moto 3, the final race of the day, there's a huge gap between us, and he came out of it much faster than he has in races before. So as we go down the second straight, you can see I still have momentum on him. So I'm using that to my advantage as I manual onto the step table. I manual this double, but right here, you can probably notice that I'm starting to ever so slightly just kind of shift my trajectory towards the left, towards the inside of the track to try and force him to take the inside white chalk line going into turn 2 because I actually want to high-low him. We get another nice manual into this triple, and here you can see that I'm beginning to set myself up for a high-low into turn number 2. Now I get a beautiful manual going into the second turn, but one thing I did not consider is the fact that I'm not getting a great pump on the backside of that double because it kind of just mellows out into this turn. So that's one of the trade-offs of doing the high-low here. Even though for just a moment, I became about even with Curtis and I might have even slightly passed him because he has the inside line, I knew he was going to take it right back as you're about to see. Boom, there he is. He's now ahead of me. We got about a tire length between us right now. And the only thing I have to do now is ride this berm and determine when I need to shoot down and come out of this sucker cranking. You can see right about here, I carve downwards and I start cranking and torquing that bike the best I could. I get a couple pumps here over this double-double, but right here, I made a costly mistake. I chose to high-low this turn, and even though I actually have pretty good momentum here, it would have been more beneficial if I would have rode closer to the race line. Maybe not right on Curtis's rear tire, but just ever so slightly off to the left-hand side of it, because I could have pulled out of this turn using the momentum that I had and maybe have passed him. In a last-ditch effort, I carve out of this turn as hard as I can. I crank as hard as I can going into these rollers, and I decided that I was going to pump my way to the finish line. Looking back, I think this worked against me because I wasn't downsiding the back of these jumps very well and getting the full pump to maintain my momentum. Considering that my legs are cramping, my body's fatigued, and endurance is basically non-existent at this point, it would have been more fruitful for my labor if I just manualed these rollers like I did in the races before. But nonetheless, I get bucked around on these last couple of rollers. I jump the tabletop and I stretch my bike out at the end. But I look to my left and I notice that Curtis beat me by about a quarter to a third of a wheel length. This was a race to the finish, and in my humble opinion, it was the best race of the day, and I would love to race Curtis again and just simply to have more races like this in the future. What a freaking blast.